I am Ethan, 32 years old. For 2 agonizing years, I silently funded my parents' entire lifestyle, paying every single utility bill to keep their comfortable suburban existence afloat, while they treated me like a dirty family secret. And my reward? Just days before my mother's milestone birthday, my own father called to ban me from the house, telling me that I was a complete embarrassment and that if I dared to show up, I should never call him my father again. He did it so my golden child brother could impress his new, high-status fiancée without my supposedly pathetic presence ruining their perfect family aesthetic. They thought they could humiliate me and discard me like trash while still treating my bank account like their personal college fund. But there was one massive detail they did not know. The high-powered tech company that this new fiancé worked for, the company my family was practically bowing down to, I built it. I was her boss. And in just a few days, the lights were going to go out on their perfect little party, and they would be begging for the very mercy they had so brutally denied me. Before I tell you exactly how this spectacular disaster unfolded, hit that like button if you believe that karma always collects its debts. And let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Your support means everything to me. Now, let us go back to the exact moment my world fractured, and my spine finally turned to steel. The screen of my phone trembled slightly in my hand. The Seattle skyline outside my corner office window was a sprawling canvas of steel and heavy gray clouds. A view I had earned through years of brutal sacrifice, late nights, and endless cups of bitter coffee. I had spent my 20s building Pacific Terrytech from a cramped garage operation into a sustainable energy juggernaut. But right then, sitting in the absolute silence of an empty executive floor, surrounded by the trappings of immense corporate success, it all felt entirely worthless. My father's voice, harsh and dripping with a condescension I had known my entire life, hung in the static between us. Arthur never called himself my dad when he was making a demand. He was a man who viewed parenting as a corporate transaction, and in his eyes, I was the failing asset. He measured a man's worth by how loud he could brag at the country club, not by the quiet responsibilities he shouldered behind closed doors. "Julian is bringing his fiancée home for your mother's birthday," Arthur said, his voice completely devoid of warmth. "Her name is Maya. She is an upper-level engineer at a massive tech firm in the city. Someone important. She speaks well, carries herself properly. We need this dinner to be absolutely perfect. There can be no distractions and no uncomfortable questions." There was a deliberate, agonizing pause. Through the receiver, I could hear the faint clinking of silverware in the background. My mother, Eleanor, was probably polishing the good silver, preparing the grand stage for her favorite son. Julian was 30 years old, chronically unemployed, and chronically praised. "And your job, Ethan?" Arthur continued, his tone flattening with each syllable into a jagged blade. "Well, it is not very comfortable to talk about. You are still just messing around with computers in some back office somewhere. We do not want Maya getting the wrong impression of our family's standing or dragging Julian down by association. Your brother is on the verge of a major real estate deal. He needs to project success. It is best if you do not come this weekend. You coming home would just embarrass the whole family in front of our neighbors and Maya." My throat constricted. Invisible hands were tightening around my windpipe, choking the air out of my lungs. I gripped the edge of my desk until my knuckles turned completely white. The polished mahogany surface beneath my fingers offered absolutely no comfort. It was a custom piece my assistant had insisted was mandatory for the co-founder of a multi-million-dollar company. But in that moment, I felt like a small, worthless child standing in the dark shadow of my father's overwhelming disapproval. I thought about the sheer hypocrisy of his words. Arthur was talking about projecting success, about real estate deals and family standing, while completely ignoring the reality of his own financial ruin. "What exactly are you saying?" My voice emerged much lower than I intended. It was a dangerous, hollow calm that I barely recognized as my own. I wanted him to say the actual words. I wanted him to own his cruelty out loud instead of hiding behind passive-aggressive suggestions. "I am saying stay away, Ethan," Arthur snapped, his temper flaring because I was forcing him to drop the polite charade. We have a reputation to maintain. If you still insist on showing your face and ruining your brother's big night with your depressing attitude, do not ever call me your father again. I mean it. You will be dead to me." The call disconnected with a soft, clinical click. It echoed in my silent office louder than any slammed door ever could. He had hung up on me. 32 years of trying to be the perfect, obedient, invisible son, erased in a 30-second phone call. All because I did not fit the glamorous narrative they wanted to sell to a stranger. At that exact second, my phone screen shifted. A push notification from my banking app slid smoothly into view. A cruel joke delivered by an emotionless algorithm. Transaction complete. Automatic monthly payment of $397 for city utilities has been processed. I stared at the bright white letters on the screen. Just like the previous 23 months. Just like the nearly $10,000 total I had quietly transferred from my salary to keep their heat running, their lights on, and their high-speed internet flowing. I paid for the water they drank. I paid for the electricity that was currently illuminating their pristine living room. I paid the exorbitant HOA fees they incurred just to keep up appearances in a neighborhood they could no longer afford. Not once in 2 long years had I received a simple thank you. Not once had they acknowledged that their mortgage-free, comfortable lifestyle was being heavily subsidized by the son they had just deemed too shameful to sit at their dining table. To them, the money just magically appeared, an entitlement they deserved simply for bringing me into the world. I set the phone down on the desk. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw my coffee mug against the thick glass wall of my office. The pain was too deep for a temper tantrum. Instead, a chilling, absolute vision flashed through my mind. It was a premonition of what was to come. I pictured their pristine house, filled with guests in expensive clothes. I pictured the smell of roasted chicken, my mother holding court in the center of the room, my brother Julian puffing out his chest and bragging about his fictional successes. And then, I pictured the utter, suffocating darkness. I pictured a phone screen lighting up a pitch-black kitchen, and a young woman in a designer dress staring at my face on a video call, the color draining from her cheeks as she whispered the word boss. I saw the absolute destruction of the false reality they had built on my back. I saw the house of cards collapsing. But we are not there yet. To truly understand why my father's words broke me that afternoon, and why my subsequent revenge was so devastatingly absolute and completely devoid of mercy, you need to understand the dark, twisted hierarchy of my family. You need to understand what it means to be the invisible pillar holding up a rotting roof, and the exact moment you decide to step away and let it all crash down. I had always believed family was everything. Growing up in our affluent, upper-middle-class suburb, I was conditioned to believe that blood loyalty trumped personal happiness. I became an absolute expert at fading into the background. I was the master of stepping aside in family photos so Julian could stand in the absolute center. I was the one who ate the burnt piece of toast, who quietly handled the tedious household chores, who fixed the broken lawnmower while my younger brother basked in the blinding, unyielding spotlight of my parents' adoration. Julian was the classic golden child. If he managed to tie his shoes without tripping, my parents threw a parade. If he brought home a report card full of terrible grades, it was never his fault. It was because the teacher was clearly intimidated by his raw potential and creativity. His minor graduations, his lateral promotions at meaningless entry-level jobs, even his dramatic breakups became monumental family events requiring extensive catering and emotional support circles. I remember Julian's college graduation vividly. It is a memory burned into my brain like a brand. It was a crisp spring day, the kind of day that looks perfect on a greeting card. My parents had invited half the neighborhood, footing a massive bill for a backyard reception that rivaled a luxury wedding. There were ice sculptures, a live jazz band, and catered filet mignon. What nobody at that party knew, and what my parents conveniently chose to bury in the deepest part of their denial, was that my early salary as a junior developer had paid for Julian's final 3 semesters. When Arthur's local real estate investments took a massive hit during an economic downturn, he panicked. He was facing a massive lawsuit from a contractor and was bleeding cash. But instead of cutting back on his expensive country club memberships or selling his luxury car, he came to me. I was the one who quietly transferred my hard-earned savings to the family account so Julian would not have to take out student loans or get a part-time job. I drained my own safety net to pad his landing. I sacrificed my own security so Julian could party through his senior year without a care in the world. During the speeches that afternoon, Arthur stood on the patio, wearing a tailored suit, raising a glass of expensive champagne to the crowd. "To Julian," Arthur boomed, his voice echoing over the manicured lawn. "A young man who pulled himself up by his bootstraps. A true self-made success. He is destined for absolute greatness, and we could not be prouder of the man he has become entirely on his own." I stood in the far corner near the plastic folding chairs, holding a cup of warm soda, wearing a suit I had bought off the rack 3 years prior. David, a guy I had considered my absolute best friend since middle school, walked right past me. He clapped Julian on the back, handing him an expensive gift bag. "Man, you are the absolute pride of the family," David had said, speaking loudly enough for Arthur to hear. David was going through a very messy divorce and a brutal custody battle at the time. His life was falling apart, and he was clearly angling for a free invitation to my family's annual lake house trip to escape his own miserable reality. David did not even look in my direction. In our family's toxic ecosystem, allying with me was social suicide. Julian was the blazing sun, and I was just the dark, empty space meant to make him look brighter. The toxic dynamics were not just limited to my parents. It was a generational poison that ran deep in the family tree, meticulously watered and pruned by my Uncle Richard. Richard was Arthur's older brother. He was a man who wore tweed jackets to family Thanksgiving dinners, treating every gathering like a hostile corporate takeover. He spoke with unearned authority on everything from politics to the stock market, despite having lost most of his own money in terrible investments years ago. He was always hovering, always manipulating the board, always whispering poison into my parents' ears. 3 years ago, during one of those suffocating holiday dinners, I overheard a conversation that should have been my ultimate wake-up call. I had gone into the hallway to grab another bottle of wine from the pantry. The house was loud, smelling of roasted turkey, expensive cigars, and forced laughter. Through the crack in the door, I heard Richard's distinct, gravelly voice talking to my parents in the kitchen. "You need to stop worrying about your retirement fund, Eleanor," Richard was saying to my mother, his tone incredibly dismissive. "You have Ethan. The boy has no social life, no wife, no ambition beyond fiddling with his computers in a dark room. He does not need much. He is your insurance policy. Keep him close, make him feel useful by paying the utility bills so Julian can focus on building a real legacy. Do not let Ethan think he is independent. If he thinks he is successful, he will leave, and you will lose your safety net." I stood there, completely frozen. The heavy glass bottle of Cabernet felt like lead in my hand. I looked over at the dining table in the next room. My cousin Leo was sitting there, chewing a dinner roll. He made direct eye contact with me. He had heard every single word Richard said. For a fleeting second, I thought Leo might speak up, maybe defend me, or at least offer a sympathetic nod to acknowledge the sheer cruelty of it. Instead, Leo quickly looked down at his plate and took another bite, choosing the safety of cowardice over the risk of defending the family scapegoat. He knew his place in the hierarchy, and he was not about to jeopardize it for me. They saw me as a wallet, an ATM machine with a pulse, a 401k plan wrapped in human skin. They were actively strategizing on how to bleed me dry to fund Julian's glamorous life. They were plotting to keep me small so they could feel big. And yet, despite knowing this, the psychological conditioning of 30 years is a heavy, rusted chain to break. When my mother called me 2 years ago, crying hysterically about rising property taxes, inflation, and her supposedly insufficient retirement income, asking if I could help them just a little bit, I caved. I set up the automatic bank transfers. I truly thought that maybe, if I proved my worth through unwavering reliability, they would finally look at me and see a son. I thought loyalty would eventually buy me love. Instead, My reliability only bred their absolute contempt. They despised me for being the one they had to rely on. My competence was a constant, irritating reminder of their own failures. Which brings us right back to the present moment. I was still sitting in my office, the echo of my father's ultimate rejection ringing in my ears. He had disowned me to protect the family's fragile image from my supposedly mediocre existence. My phone vibrated violently on the desk. A text message lit up the screen. It was from Eleanor, my mother. Just got a notice from Comcast that the high-speed internet bill is due next week. Can you take care of it immediately? Julian needs the fast connection to show Maya some presentation videos during the party. Do not forget to transfer the money. I stared at the words until they blurred. Not a single mention of what Arthur had just done to me. No apology for the fact that I was permanently banned from the very party she wanted me to finance. No checking to see if I was hurt, or angry, or even breathing. Just a cold, calculated demand. An extraction of resources. She did not care that her husband had just ripped my heart out. She only cared that her internet might lag. Something inside me snapped right then and there. But it was not a loud, chaotic break. It was not a fiery explosion of rage. It was a quiet, profound crystallization. The grief, the desperation, and the pathetic yearning for their approval froze into a massive glacier of absolute, unyielding clarity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy a seat at a table where the chairs had been removed on purpose. They did not just want my money. They wanted my total submission. They wanted the comfort of my financial support coupled with the absolute luxury of treating me like dirt on their shoes. I picked up my phone. My fingers did not tremble anymore. The frightened boy who craved his father's approval was dead. The man who built a tech empire was finally waking up, and he was not going to write another check for his own abuse. I opened my banking app. The interface was sleek, clinical, and completely detached from the emotional bloodbath of my family life. I navigated directly to the Scheduled Transfers tab. There they were. The financial lifelines of the house that had just exiled me. The invisible strings that had kept me tied to their toxic circus. City Power and Light. Auto Pay Active. Municipal Water District. Auto Pay Active. Comcast High-Speed Internet. Auto Pay Active. I selected the first one. A sterile prompt popped up on the screen. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? Yes, I whispered to the empty room. I hit confirm. Then I moved to the next one. And the next. Within 60 seconds, I completely severed the financial artery I had been keeping wide open for 2 long years. I did not do it out of an impulsive need for petty revenge. I did it out of pure, uncompromising self-preservation. They had taken my childhood, my self-esteem, and my rightful place in the family hierarchy. But they were not going to take my dignity. Not anymore. I was cutting the cord. A gentle knock on the heavy glass door pulled me from my thoughts. Clara, my executive assistant, pushed the door open. She was holding a stack of legal folders and a digital tablet. Clara had been with me since Pacific Terrytech was just a scrappy startup operating out of a cramped, poorly ventilated co-working space. She was fiercely loyal, relentlessly organized, and completely oblivious to the pathetic dynamic of my family life. She only knew the Ethan who commanded boardrooms, not the Ethan who cowered before his father. Ethan, she said, tapping her tablet with a stylus. The legal team finalized the patent paperwork for the new solar initiative. We also got the final settlement documents for that corporate lawsuit from last quarter. We won definitively, and Mr. Sterling's office just confirmed his attendance for the board meeting on Thursday. He is extremely excited about your Q3 projections and the upcoming promotion cycle for the engineering department. Mr. Sterling was a billionaire venture capitalist and our primary investor. He was a man who commanded boardrooms with a mere whisper and terrified seasoned corporate executives. Yet, when he spoke to me, it was with absolute respect. To the corporate world, I was a visionary. I controlled the massive salary structure of hundreds of employees. To my family, I was a stain they needed to scrub out before company arrived. The stark contrast between my professional reality and my personal nightmare was enough to induce severe whiplash. "Thank you, Clara," I said, my voice steadying, anchoring myself in the reality of my success. "Leave the patent files on the desk and push my 3 o'clock meeting with Marcus to tomorrow morning. I need some time to review the data." Clara frowned slightly, her professional mask slipping just a fraction. Marcus was a rival board member, a corporate shark who constantly tried to undermine my authority. He was always waiting for me to slip up so he could push his own agenda and steal the credit for my team's hard work. Usually, I engaged with Marcus immediately, fighting tooth and nail in meetings to protect my team and my vision. "Are you sure?" Clara asked, hesitating. "Marcus has been aggressively pushing for the budget reallocations all morning. Giving him silence right now might make him think you are backing down." I looked out at the rain beginning to streak the Seattle skyline, thinking of my father's arrogant demands. "Let him think whatever he wants, Clara. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is just letting the other person walk blindly into a brick wall of their own making. I am done fighting battles that do not serve me." That philosophy became my impenetrable armor for the next 2 weeks. The silence from my end towards my family was absolute. I did not reply to my mother's demanding text message about the internet bill. I did not call Arthur to argue, to scream, or to plead my case. I simply vanished from their radar, becoming a ghost in my own life. I focused entirely on the upcoming merger, burying myself in spreadsheets and strategic planning. But the real world does not operate on emotional silence. It operates on rigid billing cycles and late fees. 5 days after I canceled the payments, the first automated warnings started rolling into their pristine suburban house. I knew this because my father actually left a voicemail. I sat in my car in the underground parking garage of my building, listening to it through the Bluetooth speakers. "Ethan?" Arthur's voice boomed through the car, irritated and intensely impatient. "The power company sent some ridiculous automated call about a missed payment. You need to fix whatever glitch is happening with your bank account right now. Call your bank. Handle it today. We have a lot of preparations for your mother's party, and I will not have you ruining it with your complete incompetence." There was no concern in his voice, no reference to our last conversation where he explicitly told me not to call him Dad. Just an order barked to a subordinate. He genuinely believed that even after disowning me, I was still legally and morally obligated to pay his light bill. I deleted the voicemail before he even finished the sentence. I shifted the car into drive and left the garage. By day 10, the tension was simmering rapidly, though I remained entirely removed from the blast zone. I was in the middle of reviewing a massive commercial real estate lease for our new research and development facility when my personal phone buzzed. It was David, my old so-called friend who had spent years kissing the ground Julian walked on. I almost ignored it, but morbid curiosity won out over my discipline. I answered the call. "Hey, Ethan. Long time no see, man," David said. His voice was dripping with that fake, forced camaraderie people use when they desperately want a massive favor. "What do you want, David?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries entirely. I had no patience for small talk with a traitor. He chuckled nervously, clearly thrown off by my coldness. "Wow, straight to business. Look, I was just talking to Julian. He is hyping up this huge dinner party for your mom this weekend. Said his new girl, Maya, is coming. He was telling us all about her at the sports bar last night." "Good for him," I said, my eyes scanning a complex liability clause on the contract in front of me. "Yeah, well," David lowered his voice, dropping into a conspiratorial whisper, relishing the toxic gossip. "He was saying some pretty harsh stuff about you, man. I thought you should know. We are old buddies, right? I got your back. Spit it out, David. I do not have all day. Julian told Maya that you are entirely unemployed. He said you got fired from some low-level IT job years ago and you have been living in a tiny, depressing basement apartment, basically mooching off your parents' goodwill and draining their retirement. He told her they try to include you out of pity, but you are too embarrassed by your own massive failures to show your face at family events. He made you sound like a total parasite, man. I stopped reading the contract. My expensive pen hovered motionless over the thick paper. Julian had not just asked for me to be excluded. He had actively crafted a malicious, highly detailed fictional narrative where I was a pathetic loser, a failure who had to be hidden away so his glittering, fabricated life would not be tarnished by my mere presence. He was standing directly on my shoulders, using my hard-earned money to fund the very roof over his head, while simultaneously digging a deep grave for my reputation. He said that. I asked softly, the ice in my veins thickening into steel. Yeah, man? David sounded almost gleeful, feeding off the drama. He said you are the family's biggest regret. Anyway, I just thought it was messed up. Hey, you think you could put in a good word for me at that company you do data entry for? My divorce lawyer is bleeding me dry, and I am looking for a shift change to cover the alimony. No, David, I cannot, I said, and hung up the phone without another word. I tossed the device onto the desk. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. They were not just careless with my feelings. They were actively, strategically malicious. Julian was spinning a massive web of lies to impress a woman who, entirely unbeknownst to him, reported directly to my executive team. I leaned back in my leather chair, looking up at the ceiling. The storm was not just coming anymore. It was already here, and I was going to open the floodgates and let it wash them all away. They wanted to play a game of appearances. I was about to show them reality. The day of my mother's birthday finally arrived. It was exactly 3 weeks since Arthur had commanded me to never call him my father again. Outside my office window, a classic, brutal Seattle storm was brewing. The sky was the color of bruised iron, and heavy, aggressive raindrops were tracing jagged paths down the thick, soundproof glass. The weather perfectly matched the atmosphere inside my mind. Turbulent, dark, but firmly contained behind an unbreakable barrier of logic and control. I was the only one left on the executive floor. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I sat at my desk, an untouched cup of black coffee cooling rapidly beside my keyboard. I was not working. I was not reviewing pending lawsuits or analyzing stock trends. I was simply waiting. I was sitting in the eye of the hurricane, waiting for the walls to collapse on the people who built them. I knew their schedule intimately. I knew the precise rhythm of my mother's extravagant parties. The caterers, paid for by the money they saved from not paying their own light and water bills, would be setting up the elaborate buffet right now. Julian would be pacing the living room, adjusting his expensive tie, aggressively rehearsing whatever lies he was going to feed Maya about his fictional real estate successes. My mother would be lighting the decorative, imported candles on the dining table, entirely unaware that very soon, those candles would be their only source of light in the house. At exactly 4:45, my phone screen lit up in the dim office. Eleanor, Mother. I watched it vibrate silently on the solid mahogany wood. It buzzed its desperate, pathetic little dance until it stopped. A missed call notification appeared on the lock screen. 10 seconds later, it rang again. Arthur. Father. I let it ring. I picked up my coffee cup, rotating the warm ceramic slowly between my palms, feeling the heat seep into my skin. The hollow calm inside my chest was vast and profound. For 30 years, a call from my father would have sent a massive spike of adrenaline straight into my heart. I would have scrambled to answer the phone, terrified of his towering anger, desperate to appease him at any cost. I would have apologized for things I never even did. Now, it was just meaningless pixels flashing on a screen. Then came the text messages. They did not arrive one by one. They arrived in a frantic, overlapping barrage of utter panic. From Mom, at 4:52 p.m., Ethan, the power just went out. The entire house is completely dark. The caterers cannot use the ovens to heat the food. What is wrong with your bank account? Fix it now. We have guests arriving in 20 minutes. From Julian, at 4:54 p.m. What the hell is your problem, dude? Maya is going to be here any second and the internet is down. I need the Wi-Fi for the smart home lighting and the background music. Pay the damn bill. Stop being a useless loser and do something right for once. From Mom, at 4:58 p.m., Ethan. The water pressure just dropped to 0. The toilets will not flush. We have 30 people coming over. Answer your phone right now. You are ruining my birthday. I will never forgive you for this. I read each message as it populated on the lock screen. They were furious, panicking, unraveling violently at the seams. And yet, in all their blind panic, not a single one of them asked if I was okay. Not one of them realized that the bank account was not broken. They just assumed their personal ATM was jammed, and they were aggressively kicking it, demanding it dispense their cash. By 5:15 p.m., the extended family had been officially drafted into the war. My phone was vibrating off the desk. From Uncle Richard, you selfish brat. Embarrassing your mother on her milestone birthday? After everything they have done for you? After they paid for your life and kept you off the streets? You are a complete disgrace to this family. You should be ashamed to show your face anywhere. From Cousin Leo. Man, Julian is losing his mind over here. Just pay the bill, Ethan. You know how Dad gets when he is angry. Do not make it worse for yourself. Just fix it, apologize, and maybe they will let it slide. I set the phone back down on the desk. I did not type a single letter in response. There was absolutely nothing left to explain, no defense I needed to mount. I had spent a lifetime explaining myself to people who had firmly decided to misunderstand me before I even opened my mouth. They always chose the louder voice, the more convenient lie, over the quieter, harder truth. I sat there in the silence of my multi-million-dollar office, watching the city lights begin to flicker on through the relentless rain. In that moment, looking at those hateful messages, I realized a fundamental truth about abuse disguised as family obligation. They were not calling me because they missed their son or their brother. They were calling me because the mule had finally dropped the heavy plow, and there was no one left to drag their entitled weight through the mud. The storm had officially made landfall in their pristine suburban living room. They were drowning in the dark, surrounded by the wreckage of their own unparalleled arrogance and greed. The facade was cracking wide open, but the true devastation had not even begun, because the phone was about to ring one more time, and this time the camera was going to be on. The truth was about to step into the light, and there would be nowhere left for them to hide. I thought the worst was over. I was so incredibly wrong. The relentless vibration of my phone finally shattered the heavy silence of my office. It was not another frantic text message or an angry automated alert from a utility company. It was a video call. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see Arthur's furious face ready to berate me. Instead, the name that flashed across the glass was Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah was my mother's younger sister, and quite frankly, the only member of my extended family who possessed a shred of human decency. She was the one who used to sneak me extra slices of pie at Thanksgiving when Arthur decided I had eaten enough. She was the one who actually asked about my interests, rather than interrogating me about my salary or why I was not as successful as Julian. She used an outdated, incredibly clunky video chatting app that only she and I still kept on our phones. I took a deep breath, adjusting my posture in my leather chair, and accepted the call. The screen flickered, struggling to connect through the heavy Seattle storm, before finally resolving into a chaotic, dimly lit scene. Aunt Sarah's face appeared, partially obscured by the warm, flickering yellow light of a decorative candle behind her. I knew that kitchen intimately. I knew every single cracked tile near the baseboards, every squeaky cabinet door, the exact spot on the granite counter where my mother prepared her extravagant, overpriced meals. But tonight it looked entirely different. It looked like a war zone. The pristine, upper-middle-class illusion had been completely stripped away by the absolute darkness. "Ethan, honey," Aunt Sarah said. Her tone was gentle, probing, completely lacking the venom that had infected the rest of the family's messages. "Are you okay? It is absolute madness over here." I met her eyes through the digital screen. I could see the genuine concern etching lines around her mouth. "I am fine, Aunt Sarah. Just finishing up some work at the office." Behind her, the room was a symphony of chaos. I could hear the catering staff arguing in hushed, panicked tones about ruined hors d'oeuvres. I heard the unmistakable sound of my mother weeping dramatically, playing the ultimate victim. "You are not going to pay for it, are you?" Sarah asked quietly, leaning closer to her phone so the others would not hear. She did not accuse me. She just wanted to understand. "You know, Auntie," I said, my voice steady, carrying an icy resolve that surprised even me. "It was Arthur who told me not to come tonight. He called me explicitly to tell me that my presence would be a humiliating stain on Julian's big introduction. He said if I insisted on showing up to the party I have been funding for 2 years, I should never call him my father again. So, I am simply respecting his wishes. I am no longer his son, and a stranger does not pay his utility bills." Sarah fell completely silent. Her eyes widened as the sheer cruelty of Arthur's actions registered. But before she could offer any words of comfort, the fragile peace of our call was violently interrupted. My mother's shrill voice cut through the background noise like a jagged knife. "Is that him? Is that the selfish little brat?" Eleanor pushed her way into the frame, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled, her expensive mascara smudged from her theatrical tears. "Tell him I am completely ashamed of him. On this day of all days, my milestone birthday, how could he do this to his own mother? We are sitting in the dark like animals." Right behind her, Arthur appeared, his face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. "It is not that serious, Eleanor," he barked, trying to maintain his arrogant authority even while standing in a pitch-black kitchen. "He is just throwing a pathetic tantrum over money. What kind of son gets petty over a few $100s? We raised him. We put a roof over his head. He owes us." Then came Uncle Richard, hovering over Arthur's shoulder like a twisted advisor. "Poor Julian," Richard sneered loudly, making sure his voice carried perfectly into the phone's microphone. "Having to deal with a brother like that on the most important night of his life. The boy is a complete parasite. He always has been." I remained entirely silent. I sat in my luxurious, brilliantly lit corner office, watching this pathetic performance unfold on my screen like a tragic comedy I had seen 1,000 times before. They were so predictable. Even when faced with the direct consequences of their own horrific behavior, they could only double down on their delusions. They were not angry that I was hurt. They were furious that the ATM machine had grown a spine. Heavy footsteps approached the camera. Julian forcibly shoved Aunt Sarah out of the way and snatched the phone from her hands. His face filled the screen, twisted in an ugly sneer of pure annoyance and entitlement. He was wearing a custom-tailored suit that I knew for a fact he could not afford on his current non-existent income. "You really have no shame at all, do you?" Julian spat, his eyes wild with misplaced rage. "Mom has been crying for an hour. The caterers are threatening to leave. You are completely ruining my night. Maya is in the living room wondering why she is dating into a family of hillbillies who cannot even keep the lights on. Fix this right now, Ethan, or I swear to God." "Or you will do what, Julian?" I interrupted. My voice was not raised, but the absolute crushing weight of my tone stopped him dead in his tracks. "You will continue to lie to your fiancé about your fake real estate career? You will continue to pretend you aren't living off the money I send every single month?" Julian's face went pale for a fraction of a second before the arrogance returned. "You are just jealous," he hissed. "You are a sad, lonely loser who sits in a cubicle all day. You cannot stand that I am marrying a woman with actual class, a woman who makes a real salary. You are pathetic." I was about to end the call. I was about to press the red button and leave them to their dark, cold reality. But then, destiny intervened in the most spectacular, brutally satisfying way imaginable. Another face appeared at the very edge of the frame. It was a young woman. She had perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, and was wearing a stunning, understated designer dress. She carried herself with the sharp, alert posture of someone who navigated high-stakes corporate environments for a living. She walked up behind Julian, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, trying to soothe what she thought was just a minor family dispute over a blown fuse. "Julian, honey, is everything okay?" she asked softly. "Is the power company sending someone out?" Then her eyes drifted to the phone screen. I watched the exact millisecond her brain processed the visual information. I watched the casual, polite concern completely evaporate from her features. Her eyes locked onto my face. She looked at the expensive mahogany desk in front of me. She looked at the sprawling, panoramic view of the Seattle skyline behind me. A view that every single employee at Pacific TerryTech knew belonged to the elusive, brilliant co-founder on the top floor. The color drained from Maya's face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Her hand dropped from Julian's shoulder as if he had suddenly caught fire. Her lips parted, trembling slightly. "Mr. Ethan?" she whispered. Her voice cracked, a fragile sound of absolute terror and confusion. "Boss!" I froze. I instinctively gripped my phone tighter. I had known Maya worked for my company, but the sheer collision of my two completely separate worlds happening live on video was staggering. I studied her face, maintaining my emotionless, corporate mask. "Good evening, Maya," I said evenly. My voice was calm, authoritative, completely devoid of the pathetic desperation my family was used to hearing. The kitchen behind Maya went deathly silent. It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I watched Aunt Sarah glance over her shoulder, her jaw dropping. I watched Arthur and Eleanor freeze like statues. "Wait," Julian said, looking back and forth between Maya and the phone, his arrogant sneer faltering into deep confusion. "What did you just call him, boss?" "Maya, what are you talking about? He does data entry. He is a nobody." Maya did not look at Julian. She kept her terrified, wide eyes locked onto my face on the screen, completely ignoring the man she was engaged to. She was a senior engineer who had just been recommended for a massive promotion. She knew exactly who held the keys to her career, her salary, and her future in the tech industry. "Julian," Maya said, her voice shaking violently. She straightened her posture, looking past the phone camera to the rest of my stunned family hiding in the shadows. "In case you actually did not know, I work at Pacific TerryTech. Mr. Ethan is the co-founder of the company. He is the CEO's right hand. He owns half the firm." Her statement cut through the dark, silent kitchen like a gunshot. It plunged the room into a stunned, breathless void. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. He looked at me, then at Maya, then back at me. The carefully constructed, elaborate narrative he had spent years building, the lie that I was a failure and he was the superstar, shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces in front of his entire family. I pressed my lips together, offering Maya a slow, deliberate nod of confirmation. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I just let the crushing weight of reality suffocate them. "I hope your big introduction goes perfectly, Julian," I said smoothly, my voice echoing in the dead silence of their dark house. "Enjoy the catering." And with that, I ended the call. I set the phone down on my desk. For the first time in 32 years, I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the storm raging over Seattle, and let out a long, deep breath. The massive, suffocating weight of invisibility, the desperate need for their approval, the agonizing pain of being the family scapegoat. It all completely lifted off my shoulders. They had finally seen me, not as the pathetic loser they desperately wanted me to be, but as the titan I actually was. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I slept soundly that night. It was the first time in a decade I did not wake up with a tight chest or a grinding jaw. I did not sleep out of a petty sense of satisfaction, but because the absolute exhaustion of pretending to be smaller than I was had finally ended. The next morning, the storm had cleared, leaving Seattle washed clean and gleaming under a bright, crisp sun. I arrived at the executive floor of Pacific Tech at exactly 7 in the morning. The corporate world does not pause for family drama, and I had an empire to run. Clara greeted me with a steaming cup of coffee and a thick file folder. "Good morning, Ethan." The corporate lawyer sent over the final drafts for the pending lawsuit against that rival firm attempting to steal our patent. "We have them completely cornered. Also, the HR department needs your signature on the Q3 promotion and salary bump approvals for the engineering division." "Thank you, Clara. Leave the lawsuit file on my desk. I will review it before lunch," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. "And hold off on the engineering promotions for just an hour. I need to check my emails first." I walked into my office, the sunlight pouring through the massive windows, warming the mahogany desk. I opened my laptop and pulled up my secure corporate inbox. Amidst the endless sea of meeting reminders, financial projections, and updates from the legal team, there was a single, highly anticipated email sitting at the very top. The sender name was Maya Vance. I clicked it open, my expression remaining completely neutral. Subject: profound apologies and immediate resignation if required. "Mr. Ethan, I am writing this to you not as a family acquaintance, but as your employee. I am still entirely in shock from the events of last night. I had absolutely no idea you were Julian's brother. I have respected you and your vision for this company since the day I was hired. You are the reason I transferred to the Seattle headquarters. I feel I owe you a complete explanation, though I am deeply ashamed to give it. When Julian and I started dating, he painted a very specific picture of his family. He told me he was a highly successful real estate developer. He described you as a tragic burden on his parents. He explicitly told me that you were completely unemployed, suffering from severe behavioral issues, and that you lived in a filthy basement apartment, draining your parents' retirement fund. He said your father was heartbroken by your failures and that they tried to hide you away because you were prone to violent, embarrassing outbursts at family events. I am horrified and deeply disgusted that I believed him without question. When I realized the truth last night, when I saw you sitting in the executive office of the company I dedicate my life to, everything clicked into place. I saw Julian for the pathological liar he truly is. I saw the cruel, manipulative nature of your parents who stood in that dark kitchen and let him slander you. I did not expect the man I was going to marry to be a monster. I have officially ended my relationship with Julian and called off the engagement. I left the house immediately after the call disconnected. I will not be associating with him or your family ever again. If my profound lack of judgment regarding my personal life affects your trust in my professional capabilities, I am fully prepared to submit my resignation today. Thank you for handling the situation with such incredible grace and not putting me on the spot in front of that house full of terrible people. Sincerely, Maya." I read the email twice. The absolute audacity of Julian's lies was staggering, but it was not surprising. He had fabricated an entire alternate reality where he was the wealthy savior and I was the miserable parasite. He had tried to build his entire future on the foundation of my manufactured destruction. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and took a moment to process the sheer justice of the situation. Julian had wanted to impress Maya so desperately that he threw me under the bus. Completely unaware that he was throwing me under a bus I literally owned and operated. I pulled my keyboard closer and typed a measured, completely professional response. "Maya, your personal life is exactly that. Personal. I do not expect anyone to make life-altering decisions simply to stay in my good graces, nor do I punish my employees for being deceived by manipulative people outside of this building. You are a brilliant engineer, and your upcoming promotion is based entirely on your merit, your hard work, and your value to Pacific Tech. For the record, I strictly do not bring family matters into the workplace. This situation will not affect your salary, your career trajectory, or your standing at this firm. Do not submit your resignation. Take the day off if you need to manage your personal affairs, and I will see you at the R&D meeting on Monday. Best regards, Ethan." I hit send. No further elaboration was needed. Some things, once clarified by the harsh light of reality, require absolutely nothing more. Around 10 o'clock, while I was wrapping up a brutal strategy meeting with the department heads regarding our new corporate expansion. My personal phone began to vibrate violently in my pocket. I stepped out of the boardroom and looked at the screen. Julian. I declined the call instantly. I was not angry. I was not seeking a screaming match. I had simply reached my absolute limit of tolerating apologies that only miraculously materialized after a fake reality had been completely destroyed. Within 60 seconds, a massive block of text arrived. Julian, Ethan, please, you have to answer the phone. I am so sorry. I messed up. I was just trying to impress her and things got way out of hand. I did not mean any of those things I said. Maya packed her bags and left me. She will not answer my calls. She blocked my number. You are her boss. You have the power here. If you just call her and say something good about me, I know she will listen to you. Please, Ethan, ask her to come back to me. Do this one thing for your brother. I will do whatever you want. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the hallway, gazing down at the tiny cars navigating the Seattle streets below. I read the message, feeling absolutely nothing stir within my chest. No pity, no brotherly obligation, just a cold, clinical observation of a narcissist in total freefall. Julian was not apologizing for lying about me. He was apologizing because he got caught. He was still trying to use me, still demanding that I fix his broken life, still believing that my power and influence existed solely to serve his needs. I composed my response slowly, making sure every word was a definitive nail in the coffin of our relationship. Julian, Maya did not leave you because I told her to. She left you because of exactly who you are. She left because of how you live, how you treat people who love you, how you casually destroy others to elevate yourself, and how you genuinely believed that your lies would never catch up to you. You wanted me out of your life so you could play the big man. Congratulations. You are entirely on your own now. Do not ever contact me again. I hit send, then immediately went into my phone settings and blocked his number. I blocked Arthur. I blocked Eleanor. I blocked Uncle Richard. I severed every single digital tie I had to the toxic anchor that had been dragging me down for 3 decades. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, straightened my suit jacket, and walked back into the boardroom. The storm was completely over, and I was the only one left standing. 2 silent, completely peaceful weeks passed. I heard through the corporate grapevine that Maya had requested a temporary transfer to our southern branch in Texas to escape the immediate fallout of her broken engagement. I approved the paperwork instantly, no questions asked, ensuring her salary and relocation expenses were fully covered by the company. I was thriving. Pacific TerryTech had just closed a monumental funding round, securing $47 million in venture capital to expand our renewable energy grids. My face was on the cover of a major tech magazine. I was no longer the invisible sun hiding in the shadows. I was a titan of industry. One evening, after a long day of celebrating the funding closure with Mr. Sterling and the board, I drove my car. A sleek, black Porsche Panamera that I had bought for myself as a reminder of my worth, into the driveway of my private, gated home in the upscale Mercer Island neighborhood. As the heavy iron gates swung open and my headlights swept across the manicured lawn, they illuminated a sight that made my blood run ice cold. Standing on my front porch, huddled together against the evening chill, were Arthur and Eleanor. They each held a small, pathetic-looking suitcase. Their faces were drawn, exhausted, and painted with an expression of manufactured humility I had never seen before. I put the Porsche in park, killing the engine. I did not ask why they had come or how they had bypassed the neighborhood security. It was not a casual, loving family visit. You do not show up unannounced with luggage unless you are desperate. I walked up the stone steps, my expression completely neutral. I unlocked the heavy oak door and silently invited them inside. I did not want to have the inevitable screaming match on the porch where my wealthy neighbors could overhear the dysfunction. We sat in my expansive, minimalist living room. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of my mother nervously stirring the cup of tea I had begrudgingly prepared. Arthur spoke first. His voice was lower, completely lacking the booming arrogance he usually wielded like a weapon. "Ethan, we owe you an apology. We let things get entirely out of hand. The things I said on the phone before the party, I was stressed. Julian was stressing me out. I never meant to disown you." Eleanor chimed in, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. "Your father is right, honey. We were just so caught up in Julian's life. We forgot about our other beautiful son. We missed you so much. Family should never fight like this." I remained utterly silent. I sat in my expensive armchair, my hands resting lightly on the armrests, observing them like a scientist studying a predictable, parasitic organism. I listened closely to determine whether this apology marked a genuine ending to their abuse, or simply the beginning of a brand new grift. As I fully expected, it took less than 5 minutes for the mask to slip. Arthur cleared his throat, his eyes darting around my luxurious living room, taking in the expensive art and the high-end furniture. "We are family, Ethan," Arthur said, his tone gradually shifting back toward that familiar, entitled edge. "And family helps each other. We raised you, we fed you, we paid for your childhood. Everything you have built, everything you own right now, a part of it comes from the foundation we gave you, right?" I looked at him, my posture straightening almost imperceptibly. "Get to the point, Arthur." Eleanor leaned forward, using her softest, most manipulative voice, the exact tone she used when she wanted me to pay the Comcast bill. "Well, sweetheart, things have been very difficult since the bank error with the utility bills. Julian is absolutely devastated. He cannot get out of bed. And we read the tech magazine at the dentist's office yesterday. We saw that your company just got $47 million in funding. You are so successful now. We are so proud." She paused, taking a breath. "If you could maybe just send us about $2,000 a month? Just a little support for your aging parents. It is practically pennies for someone like you. It would save us from having to take out a second mortgage on the house." I stared at the two people sitting on my custom Italian leather sofa. The exact same people who, less than a month ago, had exiled me from a family gathering because they thought I was a disgusting embarrassment. The same people who stood in the dark and let my brother call me a parasite. Now they were sitting in my multi-million-dollar home, placing a strict monetary value on their fake apology. $2,000 a month. Suddenly, because my success was public and undeniably massive, I was worth reconciling with. A soft, completely involuntary laugh escaped my lips. It was not loud and it was not mocking. It was the kind of laugh that emerges when someone tells a lie so fundamentally absurd that it defies all logic. My parents watched me expectantly, as though waiting for me to pull out a checkbook and nod in obedient agreement. But I was not the terrified boy anymore. I had traveled way too far for that. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my voice deadly steady. "What about Julian? How much will the golden child be contributing to your retirement fund each month?" The room seemed to pause. The air grew incredibly dense. Arthur glared at me, and Eleanor responded carefully, her voice dropping slightly. "Your brother's career in real estate is still very unstable right now. And the brutal breakup with Maya has taken a massive psychological toll on him. He cannot work. He needs our support right now." I nodded gently. It was the exact same tired excuse, repackaged in sympathetic language, but ultimately just a deflection to protect their favorite asset. I raised my gaze, looking directly into Arthur's eyes. "Here is my counteroffer. If Julian signs a legal contract agreeing to support you with $2,000 per month, I will do the exact same. I will match his contribution. No more, no less." They stared at me, completely stunned. They knew Julian did not have $200, let alone $2,000. "Or," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper of pure steel, "if you want me to carry the full financial burden of your lives, I will need something in writing. I want my corporate lawyer to draft an irrevocable legal agreement confirming that you are signing the deed of your house over to me. Upon your passing, the entire inheritance, the real estate, everything belongs to me in full. Julian gets absolutely nothing. You want me to be your bank?" Then I demand collateral. I sat perfectly still after that. No pressure, no further explanation. Just waiting to see how they would respond now that, for the very first time in my entire life, I was establishing ruthless business terms for what they had always considered my unbreakable obligation. The silence felt like a physical presence between us, heavy with 30 years of unspoken expectations and buried resentment. Suddenly, Arthur's face turned purple. He exploded, rising to his feet so fast he knocked his teacup over, spilling hot liquid across my glass coffee table. "You ungrateful little bastard!" Arthur screamed, his voice reverberating through the high ceilings of my living room, his chest heaving with rage. "You are setting conditions for your own parents? We raised you for over 20 years. We kept you off the streets. And now you want to nickel and dime us like some greedy corporate shark? You want to steal your brother's inheritance? What kind of sick, twisted life are you living?" He shouted so loudly I was certain my neighbors could hear every word through the walls. But I did not flinch. I did not cower. I just sat with my hands resting on the armrests, my gaze completely steady. I was not cold, but I was no longer gentle. I waited for his temper tantrum to completely burn out before standing up carefully. I buttoned my suit jacket. My voice emerged low, calm, yet clear enough to cut through the chaotic mess he had created in my home. "I think you both should leave my house immediately, before I call the police." It was not a threat spoken in blind anger. It was merely a polite request from a man who had finally reached the absolute limits of what his self-respect could endure. No one said anything else. Eleanor began to cry real tears this time, realizing the ATM was permanently closed. The only sound left was the pathetic dragging of their cheap luggage across my expensive hardwood floors, and the heavy thud of my front door closing behind them. A sound quieter than everything they had left unsaid, but infinitely more powerful. After they left, I stood at the massive window of my living room, watching them trudge down my driveway toward their aging sedan. I watched their taillights fade into the Seattle night, and I realized something profound. The familiar, deep ache in my chest, the heavy, suffocating knot of anxiety I had carried for 3 decades, had finally, completely dissolved. It has been 2 full years since that night. I have not seen them since. I kept their numbers blocked, I instructed Clara to screen all my corporate emails, and I completely cut the toxic cord that had kept me tethered to their dysfunction. I stopped reaching out and simply waited to see if they would ever try to contact me just to see how I was doing, without a financial motive attached. They never did. In those 2 years, there has been no phone call asking about my health, no birthday card in the mail, not even a simple text message asking if I am happy. The silence proved exactly what I had always feared, but desperately needed to know. I was never a son to them. I was simply a resource. And once the resource dried up, my existence ceased to matter. I heard through Aunt Sarah that the family structure collapsed shortly after they left my house. Without my monthly utility payments, Arthur and Eleanor were forced to downsize, selling the pristine suburban house to pay off the massive debts Arthur had hidden. Julian, unable to leech off his parents any longer, finally had to get a miserable entry-level job. He still blames me for ruining his life. Even David, the old friend who had so eagerly betrayed me, faced his own brutal karma. His messy divorce ended in a total disaster for him. He lost custody of his kids and was ordered to pay crippling alimony, proving that clinging to toxic people like Julian only drags you down with the sinking ship. I used to believe that with enough time, enough money, and enough patience, my family would magically change. I used to think I could buy their love by paying their bills. But I have realized the hard way that some people never change, especially those who refuse to acknowledge they are holding the knife. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that made you sick. And so I mourned them. I went through the emotional equivalent of a funeral for the parents and the brother I desperately wished I had, but never truly existed. Today I still live in Seattle. I still run Pacific TerryTech, pushing the boundaries of renewable energy and ensuring my employees, like Maya, receive the massive promotions and salaries they actually deserve. I move through my days with a lightness I never thought possible. The only difference is that I no longer allow myself to be an emotional ATM, ready to dispense my soul and be damaged in the name of twisted family obligation. I have begun building a completely new life, surrounded by a chosen family. I have built relationships with people who see me clearly for who I am. I have colleagues who value my brilliant ideas, friends who call just to check in, and Aunt Sarah who comes over every Sunday for dinner just to laugh and share a meal. I even have someone special in my life now, a woman who looks at me with genuine love and interest, rather than expectation and greed. If there is one massive, undeniable truth I have learned from this entire nightmare, it is that family is not a biological trap where people can demand your money, abuse your kindness, and call it love. Real family is where you are valued as a human being. Real family respects your boundaries. You are not a backup plan, a college fund, or a last resort when everything else fails. Before I close this chapter of my life and end this video, I want to ask you a question. Was I wrong? Was I too harsh to refuse $2,000 a month to the aging parents who technically raised me? I used to believe that family could fix anything if you just tried hard enough. But after being treated like a disgusting stranger in my own home more times than I can count, I chose to stand up, break the cycle of abuse, and walk away. Was I too cold? Perhaps. Or perhaps I was finally learning to value my own life at exactly the right time. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to cut the cord on toxic people you were supposed to love? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of survivors who know their worth. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Stay strong and never apologize for protecting your peace.